Hey, I'm Brian. I'm the founder and CEO. We are consumer acquisition. We're a 7.5-year-old company. As he mentioned, we've managed $3 billion in paid social spend. That's across Facebook, Google, Apple, and other platforms, but primarily Facebook. The folks around the rim are the logos for the titles or companies that we are or have just completed working with. Just a couple of slides I'm going to cover that are like pure marketing stuff. Right, so you understand who we are and why we're talking. We offer three things that are completely unique and distinct. Our creative studio, which produces videos and images at scale. It's a la carte. We'll explain why that's important on the next slide or two. We work with companies, as he mentioned, Playrix, Jam City, Rovio, and King on the creative only side. So they don't use us for media buying. You can also use us for media buying. So we do creative plus managed services. Matchington Mansions, Glue, Wooga, Roblox, and others. Or a platform, which if you're not spending more than $250,000 a month, you shouldn't consider a platform, and you should never pay more than 1% of spend if you are using a third-party tool. We are both a Facebook and a Google marketing partner. It's an accomplishment that's a little bit hard to get. I think we're one of only 2 companies in the world that have both creative and ad tech. So that's a little bit on us. Let's jump to the fun slide. So I put the slide in about the creative team just to set a bit of context on why I think this is unique. We were fortunate enough to hire Mike. He's our creative director. Mike's a badass. He's worked on a bunch of Disney animated films. He was one of their senior animators for about 20 years. He built a team down in LA of 2D, 3D visual effects storytellers. And we've recently hired some branding folks from traditional branding agencies. The reason is we want to be able to tell stories in the ads that we're designing, and we think that begins with the original creative idea. As a bit of context, we've designed over 300,000 videos for clients in the last few years. They're all bespoke, they're original, there's no templates. It's an arduous process of brief writing and competitive analysis and things of that nature. And the purpose is we think that it's really difficult to beat ads. So we want to come up with something really original. So the one thing in the prior session I just wanted to highlight again here is, I like to say user acquisition is dead. This is less provocative, but I like the first title. And by dead, that means the traditional role of a UA manager is they launch ads, they adjust bids, they adjust budgets, and they optimize. And if you look at what's happened over the course of February 2018 forward, systematically kind of feature by feature is being automated with machine learning. So bids, budgets, dynamic language optimization, AEO, app event bidding, VO, value bidding, at least on the Facebook platform, are being done by the machine. And I think it's a really great thing. The reason I think it's a great thing is, when you ask people on our team, the UA managers, hey, why are you doing it this way? When the guy next to you who's working on the same client, different account, is doing it completely different, the answer will be, because I like to do it this way. Or, hey, it worked for a different client. Where a machine will just test and retest and hyper test the same thing over and over and over again, or on a monthly or quarterly basis. So it's not biased in the way that humans are. So what Google has done with UAC is it's really set it and forget it, where there's very limited controls that a UA manager has. Facebook is working on that path, and there's a lot of components of that path, some of which are outlined here. And what they're pushing towards is this thing they call structure for scale. And the reason for kind of outlining this complex thing is it's their best practice, their recommendation for how to prepare for full automation. And it works. I mean, it is a darn good tool. Now, the question is, what component of the market segment does it work for? Does it work for everyone? Does it work for up to $250,000? Don't know. We have to see. If you buy into the philosophy that bids, budgets, campaign structure, these things are going to be automated, what happens to the UA manager? What are the important things? And it quickly, you figure out it's all about creative. Creative drives the highest performance ratio. So if you're talking about, will a new audience drive more value? Will ad copy drive value? Will my bids and budget changes drive value? Those are de minimis. Those are in the 15% range, where new creative is logarithmic. I mean, it will completely transform a portfolio, take you from being marginally profitable to obscenely profitable. And once you do it once, you're like, shit, I want to do that again. The challenge is really hard to do. So off to the right is a client, 73 million in spend over the last bit of time. The horizontal axis is the number of ads tested. The vertical axis is the number of creatives. Sorry, other way around. Spend is vertical, horizontal is number of ads. So a very limited amount of ads spend a majority of the budget. It's around 5%. If an ad doesn't beat the best video in your portfolio, you're going to shut it down. Why? Because you lose money running it. So this is a constant gladiator battle of what's the most efficient ad I can discover, how do I optimize that ad, and how do I kill it? So it's an endless loop, and it takes an awful lot of work to get there. So people ask us this question all the time, and I'm just showing this slide to focus on the kind of Excel-y thing over to the right. How many videos should I produce? Here's about my media spend. So this is a hand grenade on what we recommend. The reason is, how much of your portfolio is the real answer do you want to allocate for non-converting spend? If you assume that 95% of the budget you invest to test new videos goes to zero, meaning you get very little financial return from it, you have to figure out your net blended ROAS, return on ad spend, and in order to figure out how much money you want to spend. So proportionally, whether you're in-app ads or in-app purchase based, this is directional. I've been working with the Matching Sim Mansion since 2017. And it's a match 3 game. So similar to Candy Crush or one of the games that many of us have played. What we figured out a couple of years ago is it has zero to do with gameplay, the ads. If we made the ads funny, entertaining, the propensity of people to click on the ads was substantially higher than if we showed gameplay. Now, the unknown was, would it convert? Would it drive high LTV, or would people churn? The results are it has a 100 to 200% greater efficiency in LTV. So people who come in with some sense of entertainment stick longer in the game, even though, if I can hit play and it works, you see a bunch of animation techniques here. 2D, 3D, 2.5D, no match 3 gameplay, right? Just a bunch of kind of silly videos that are entertaining. And by the way, if you're running ads, set it on fire. I highly recommend it. Burning stuff is good. If you're a game developer, I highly encourage you to put a bonus level early in the game where you burn shit. And I think you will find that the payoff loop from ad to funny will be closed, and it would be good for people. All right. So one of the things as we get ready to kind of talk about the stuff we didn't in the prior room is there is, I'm going to try and put this back so I don't drop it. There's creative history being maintained by the control video. And it's important to be aware of this. For the past couple of years, we have been testing A/B. And the assumption was, if I can beat the control, it's a good video. If I can't beat the control, we throw the video away. And what it turns out is the reason the control is so difficult to beat is the platform knows what the control is. So it always starts out with knowledge on its performance, where other ads don't. And so it isn't a fair fight in that sense, in the way that we're running A/B testing. So to be clear, I'm not talking about Facebook best practices. I'm not talking about getting out of the learning phase and going into the optimize phase. I'm talking about the way we run this, which John's going to go into some depth on. So specifically, we're using IPM, impressions per install, as a proxy for doing initial creative testing. Why? It's cheap. And we'll explain why it's cheaper. So one is creative history. The second, it's all about the Benjamins, baby. It's much cheaper to do it this way by an order of magnitude. And I'll give you just a test case. There's a lot of variables when you don't use best practices. Multiple ads per ad set, 1 ad per ad set. Which countries should I test in? Should I launch at what time of day? Should I include the weekends or not include the weekends? There's a lot of stuff we don't know because it's a black box. And so we're testing all of this. We've released a white paper today that outlines some of it, and we'll do an update in about a month or so as we start to uncover more learnings. It's free, feel free to download it. So a bit of context here before John comes up. So these are the verticals that we've run this test in. So gaming, e-commerce, entertainment, automotive, direct-to-consumer, financial services. We, as I mentioned, new concept versus controls. We do not recommend that you do any variation testing at all except for your winner. Don't ever variate because it's just wasting money. It's likely you have a loser, not a winner. The tests we run, we try and super squish them, right? 2 days, maximum of 7 days. The variability there is cost per subscriber and how much you want to blow up the non-converting spend. And again, we're using our tool, not Facebook native tools. There's some differences in terms of capabilities between the API and native tools. So I think those are important context to add. Also, to be specific, so about 10,000 A/B tests have been run over the course of the last couple of years, so a lot of data. The insights that John's about to share with you are specific to the way that we're doing A/B testing. It's not Facebook best practice, so I want to restate that. There's a lot of reasons why keeping control history is really valuable for people. We didn't know that, so it wasn't valuable in the way that we were testing. Now we do. Beyond the verticals that I've outlined here, we have not done testing. So if you kind of zoom in on our recommendation, it's based on the specifics of what we're laying out here, just so that we're all on the same page. We're not trying to say that this is the way that everything should be tested, and we're certainly not saying that this is a best practice. A couple of things I wanted to run through here is why are we doing what we're doing? It's all about stat sig or lack thereof, statistical significance. So this is just a basic math example to explain why we're doing this. In focusing on the gaming industry, because it's easier for us to kind of articulate the conversion functions here, if you consider to reach 95% statistical significance, i.e. you're certain, and you have a 1% install rate to purchase, you want to get at least 100 purchases, and your purchases cost $200, you're going to spend $20,000. So what? That's $20,000 per video that's unproven to prove whether or not it works, right? That's an enormous amount of money just to find out it's going to fail. So you can do it, but we don't recommend that for the way that we do it. So we're growth hacking, right? We're trying to come up with the cost-effective, time-condensed way to identify losers primarily so we can cull them and separate them. Do we generate false negatives? Yes. Do we generate false positives? Yes. What John's going to lay out is we have a 3-step process designed to capture those and allow us to limit the financial exposure. So here's the kind of hacking technique, right? You can get the same 95% statistical significance or proxy thereof if you move to IPM, so impressions per install. And as you can imagine, if you're generating installs instead of purchases and your CPI or cost per install is $2, that's $200. Now imagine if you moved it to an English-speaking country that's not the US, Singapore, India, etc. The CPMs drop, which means the cost per test drop. So there's increased savings that you can do by testing internationally. So the difference between 20,000 to 200, can you take the 200 down to 20? Something to be considered for you to test further. We have found that testing internationally shows the same velocity independent of the amount you spend, and the same 2 or 3 winners or losers will always be in the same locations. Just the separation between the two are a variable, but you can reliably use them if you follow this 3-step process. All right, John, explain who you are.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everyone. My name is John Choi, and I'm VP of UA here at Consumer Acquisition. So just to give you a bit of myself about my background is that I've been doing performance user acquisition for the past 13 years or so, and I've been mainly focusing on mobile gaming. And before joining consumer acquisition, I was head of UA over at Zynga. So I'd like to share a good example of one of our clients. So over the course of past 2 to 3 months, we developed 60 different videos for this client, and then we tested them, and we realized that all of those new creatives that we developed had actually failed. It didn't have any IPM winners compared to the control. So we thought that this was almost impossible because we've been dealing with a lot of different clients, and usually we get a lot of winners compared to the control. So we went ahead and decided to do an AA test where we didn't actually use the puppies for video. The reason why we're showing the puppy videos here is because we don't want to expose who the client was. But when we actually roll out the AA test, what we did was that we used the same video, but in front of the video, we placed the black pixel, and it enforces the Facebook to create a new hash. So the system itself will treat it as a new creative. So we've done that, and then we rolled it out. And as you can see here, the one that's highlighted in blue is the control. And if you look to the right, you see the result here where the IPM is somewhere ranging between somewhere around 5 and 8.5. So here, one thing that we discovered is that we exactly the same copy with just the black pixel that's placed in the front. We found out that our clone outperformed control by almost 150%. So test number 2. So we decided to test it further, and we designed different videos. However, it was the videos that with the new concept that are similar to the control. And for the control, we decided to use different headers to see what happens. And if you look to the right, the IPM chart there, the results were varied, but as you can see, it wasn't as varied as whatever we're seeing before. It was staying within the same IPM range that we're looking at. So IPMs overall were in between 7 and 11. And lastly, this is our aha moment. So we're still using the same control, which is the image of the puppy. However, we roll out 5 new video concepts that are completely different than the control. And as you can see from the chart on your right, the start of the IPM were vastly different. So the control IPM started at around 8 versus all these new visuals that we see are starting at around 2, and some of them are even as low as 0.5. So as Brian mentioned, we learned that by rolling out this test, we learned that Facebook, it's a good thing for optimization. Facebook keeps the history of creative for your control. So just to sum it up, we have some hypothesis, going on that still needs to be tested over time. And but if you look into the chart, as we roll out more tests, you have the IPM that are definitely you see the IPMs that are getting clustered. And for new concept, you see that how the IPM starts from the bottom rather than starting from the top. So one thing that we figured out is that our IPM testing method is still valid as long as we don't use a control video within the same ad set. And then also we learned that new out-of-the-box concept, while using the same control within your ad set, it's really, it's not a fair comparison because you're having to have your new creative end up going against the one that has a rich history behind it. So here's some of the testing process we developed by understanding, what's going on in the background. And these are like step-by-step process on, what we consider to be the best practice for now. We are always growth hacking for our clients because as Brian mentioned, in order for any client to reach the statistical significance, you need like $20,000 per variation. And it is really something that's really hard to come up with if you are testing like 80 to 100 different creatives every month. So this is the recommended testing phase that consumer acquisition and my team, including myself and Brian, developed. So we have the first phase of initial IPM test. Basically, what you do is that you take your new creative and put it in one ad set within Facebook, and you do MAI bidding, and make sure that you don't include control in there because it wouldn't be a fair comparison. It is recommended to do split testing on Facebook because by doing that, you get a same spend distribution between your variations. And also, you want to control your target audience too when you do this so that you don't have Facebook delivering your ads towards people that are not really relevant to the creative. Because your creative, remember, it doesn't really have any historical data behind it. So it's very important for the initial IPM test for you to actually super focus on your audience that you are targeting. So our recommendation is to use 5% lookalikes in US. Right now, we're in the process of testing different countries, and we'll roll out which other countries that you can test in as we learn more. But for now, it's recommended that you stick to US. By doing that, we found out that your audience reach is going to be about 10 million or so. Other geos might be different, but sticking to your 5% lookalikes of your payers is really important. And you want to isolate one OS. It could be iOS or Android. I know that some clients like to use Android because it's cheaper. So feel free to use iOS on Android. But you want to stick to the OS that you want to scale for. So that's the most important part. Make sure that you use newsfeed only on Facebook. I know that Facebook has Instagram, newsfeed, and then also other types of network that are blended in there. And we learned that depending on each platform, your metrics can vastly different. So when you're testing for your IPM, just sticking to the newsfeed only is something that's really important for you. And goal is to get to 100 install by using this split testing. If you are dealing with apps that has higher CPIs, it's okay to get 50 installs, but just know that your confidence will be lower compared to 100 install or even compared to 270 installs. And we've seen that by doing this method, the lifetime budget per variation is at around $250 to $500. And with this budget, you can reach to 70% confidence level. During phase one, it's really important. We talked about not including the control in there. So during phase one, I know that you'll have a lot of different variations and concept. And you want to really utilize this phase to make sure who loses fast. Because you want to get to the one that's winning the rest of them. And this is the main purpose of your phase one. So phase two is what we call the initial ROAS testing. So once you identify your winners from phase one, then you want to take these winning ads and move it on to phase two. And phase two, what you're testing for is that since everyone in the industry, I would say 90 to 95% of them are optimizing for ROAS, it's important that your ad is not only an IPM winner, but your ad is also ROAS winner. So for phase two, you want to make sure that you want to create a new campaign for phase two so that you don't compete against any sort of campaign that are out there that are running. And utilizing AEO and VO, and those are the Facebook bidding method that are highly focused on your monetization and your ROAS. So you want to utilize AEO or VO, not MAI. And with this test, you want your audience to be a little bit broader. I know that we talked about during phase one, you are using 5% lookalikes, but phase two, you want to use 10% lookalikes. So instead of doing about a 10 million audience, you are now looking at close to 20 million or even more. The reason you do that is that the sample size is going to be smaller for purchasers. That's why you're broadening your audience. And also the reason why you can broaden your audience is that, as soon as you are doing AO and VO, you are heavily relying on the Facebook's ability to find the users for you. And if your target is very limited, then Facebook will have a hard time and it'll be on the learning phase all the time. So you want to make sure that you broaden your audience so that it gives more room for Facebook AI to go and find the payers for your ads. And for here, your lifetime budget is recommended at around $800 or $1,500. All right, so once you have all the winning ads from phase 2, now it's the game time. So phase 3, it's the scale test. So once you identify your IPM winner, and after that, once you identify your ROAS winner, you take the ads and basically get it ready to compete against the control. Basically, what you do is that within the same campaign where your control is running, you want to make sure that you use campaign budget optimization. So what it does is that you are putting your ads under the same campaign, but you don't directly put it under the same ad set where your control creative is running. So what you're telling Facebook AI is, hey, Facebook, I got all these new winners. It's warmed up enough for ROAS testing, so I know that this ads monetizes. So I want to make sure that it's competing against the budget depending on the ROAS target we put there. However, we don't want you to pick the winning ad right away because I know that you have a lot of history on your control. So we don't want you to do that anymore, but I'll still put it to compete against the budget for this campaign. So that's the last step. And if just watch how it performs, if it scales and if ROAS improves, definitely that's the winner. But if it continues to lose in terms of taking the budget out of your control, then you just gotta keep on developing new creative and continue iterating it depending the same process, using the same process, and just go step by step from 1 to 3, and you want to repeat the process and over again. So we still have a lot of hypotheses, and we've been testing pretty much like as we speak. We have team, testing different geos right now. We like to call ourselves growth hacker and also code cracker. So I know that Facebook is very efficient. However, we feel the need of developing a very cost-effective creative testing method for our clients because our money is limited and we all care about being a very ROI positive and ROAS. So I know that there's a lot of assumptions on this test. And when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. So everything that we assume, we want to test it. And I know that Brian talked about releasing the white paper. It's still in the process of developing. There's no perfect solution. Every client is different from each other. But this is the process that we figure out that works for a lot of the clients that we have. So we think that's the best solution, but there's still a lot of hypotheses that's going on right now. And for some of them, I like to share, is 5% lookalikes better than 10% lookalike, or should we actually do 20% lookalikes? We talked about geo. Is US the best geo to test for? How about like something like Philippines, or even for ROAS testing, is 10% US good enough? What about we go to different geos like UK or even Malaysia or Thailand, where you can reach a statistical significance with costs that are a lot cheaper compared to like running in US, where that cost per purchase is close to $200. Does a new campaign matter? Like, we don't know. We're currently testing it right now. As we learn more, we'll release more information about it. All right, that's it from me. I'll hand it off to Brian to talk more.
You just stay, okay. So, again, it's not a best practice. This is what we're doing. A couple of things that John said, just to restate them. Phase 1, IPM testing. Phase 2, sniff test. Will it make any money? Phase 3, ROAS scale. Don't forget in phase 3, you can juice the ad by forcing CBO to spend a minimum amount on the new ad. And the reason you want to do that is it doesn't have enough statistical relevance to know what to do with it yet. So you may need to force spend there. There's lots of tactics around how to do that, but be aware that is a variable that you can do. So this is the technique that we're using. Why does it matter? The reason it matters is if you think, just for one client, we developed about 600 videos over the course of 2019. Every time we failed, which was a lot, you send the creative team in a different direction, right? Fail, different direction, fail, different direction. And it tectonically shifts their vision for what creative to do. When the reality was they didn't fail, we weren't testing it right. And so as we go back and we look at those videos, we're seeing a success rate in the neighborhood of 15 or 20%. So that means that where we thought we were failing, we actually are reviving those ads. And we've seen some significant ROAS winners that we're able to bring back, which then resets their creative thought process and opens their field wider so that they have more to play with. And as you can imagine, if you're developing 50 to 100 ads per client per month and they all bomb, it's pretty frustrating pretty quickly, right? So we're trying to figure out the way to balance non-converting spend and how do you get to statistical relevance with keeping enough blue sky so that the creative team has enough to test with. That's what we have. We don't need to talk about this one. That's it. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
So you might already touched on this, but you mentioned that you're seeing the bias towards the control. So Facebook bills your split testing as the fair way of testing. Do you think that you're observing a bias on both the split test and on just putting them in one asset?
Let me say it differently. They're maintaining creative history. And the benefit of maintaining creative history is good if that's your intent. And what we're finding is we were doing something different. I wanted to hit a magic button that said, I want A, B, C, D, E pure. And so it's with that understanding that that's what we were doing where we were making the false decision. The reason we were doing that is we didn't want to spend 20 grand, right? We wanted to spend 200. So we're making concessions along the best practice and carving out in an effort to reduce the amount we're investing per ad.
Yeah, I just meant, so you were observing the bias when you're doing split test as well. So it's not like when you do split test, it would isolate out that history.
You cannot turn off creative history. Can't be done. So the only way to really testing this, don't use the control. Think of this like a badass gladiator, right? It's your winning ad, and it's a kind of crazy person, and you just lock it in a room, and you don't touch it, and you don't mess with it. When you get someone that you think wants to fight the gladiator, you better make sure they're strong. So you don't mix them in the same room. For the highest velocity clients, those spending 500 grand or more a month, they always have a separate test account so that you don't pollute the primary account with low quality ads. You isolate it and let the testing happen there. Questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in the space, so I don't know if this question is going to come out right, but how often is using this new process, phase 1 and phase 2, how often are you finding that it's beating the control? Oh, and also I wanted to ask you, please stop making Matchington so effective, because my wife is spending $50 a month on that.
Your wife should talk to my wife because she irritates me. She will never spend money on a game. And I'm like, honey, that's how we make money. Like, we're talking like $1, really? You can't put $1 in? We're early. We're only 2 weeks in.
Oh, okay.
Here's what we found. For one client, right, the one where we developed 60 ads, 5 of those should not have been deleted. They should have been taken into the scale phase. So will they beat the phase 3 or the control? We're still figuring it out. One looks like we have a grand slam, and that's a kick in the ass. Right? We threw this away in November, and it could have transformed the portfolio as we were going into Black Friday and Christmas. And so 2 things, right? One is the financial impact of throwing away things that could work. The second one is just an internal creative motivation side around why is everything so difficult? And that's what happens to teams is they put on blinders, right? They know it works and they stick in their lane and they don't variate because the failure rate is so high when it's really not, right? If you test it this other way. Yes.
Say you test in like Singapore or another place, how does that track back? How accurate is that to when you actually move it back here?
Identical.
Really?
So if you look at the IPM stack, this is what I mean by identical. The IPM winners are the IPM winners. The separation between IPM is smaller, so you may have to add a second or a third, potential winner in. But that you weed that out in initial ROAS testing. You're able to spend $20, not 200, right? So it's a step function. If you could do that, when you have to go back and retest, which you've already spent money on, right? You want to minimize that financial impact of retesting. It's working. The question is, will it work for ROAS? There's obviously cultural sensitivities and lots of things to be considered, especially when you're looking at mid-core, hardcore games that are different based on the geography. So there's some nuances here that we're sorting out. Yes?
Have you considered taking to this whole testing structure, looking at kind of gross revenue events, like retention, things that once they get into the product, like what are the effects of different types of creative? The certain creative higher retention, lower retention, kind of long-term user quality effect.
So the question is around retention rate tied to creative. That's a damn good question that a CRO at a publisher should answer for you. I've always been mystified by that, to be honest. I've looked at the math behind the LTV curves, and I'm like, that's voodoo, man. The fact that you can project something out 720 days with confidence is extraordinary to me, but it works. So is it done at the per asset level? I don't think so. But we know that our cohorts, right? So we're not separating it by ad, but as you look at fake ads or whatever you want to call the stuff we're doing with the pickers, non-game play ads, the cohort LTV is on par or higher as it matures out past 60 days. Yeah.
Sorry, can you quickly restate the reason why we don't evaluate ROAS in the first phase, meaning why we don't, like when we have all of our creatives in the initial phase, just evaluate ROAS instead of IPM?
Too expensive.
Okay, meaning you have to run it for longer in order to evaluate ROAS?
Well, it's $20,000 versus 200, right?
Okay.
Normally, a high IPM ad will also monetize well. What's IPM? You're normalizing out, you're taking out the CPM increment, and you're using the conversion rate delta to say, these are relatively now in a normal field. So if you forget monetization and you just say the propensity of a person to see the ad and click is similar, then the propensity to monetize should be similar. Again, false negatives and false positives are going to happen.
Yeah.
On average, this is working.
But I remember using the first phase, like 2 to 7 days for testing IPM.
Yeah.
Right, and then how much longer is it for the ROAS phase?
So initial ROAS phase is somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 days. Scale test is a couple of weeks.
Okay.
We go slow, right? Because the worst thing to do is to kill your control.
Yeah.
Like if you do it wrong and you put the competitors with the control and you just blew out your best performing video, you're going to compress like crazy the financial performance of the title. So you don't want to do that.
In the batches of new creative that you're testing in all of these different phases, would you suggest to test vastly different concepts within each batch?
Yes.
Or small iterations?
No, never test iterations. So we're not doing hot dog dogs, which I love. I just think they're ridiculous. We're not doing this weird shit. But the point of this is they had absolutely nothing visually to do with each other, right? They're radically different. The point of this slide is my assumption, I don't know what's really going on, is there's facial recognition or machine learning that's clustering similar attributes, because otherwise the IPMs wouldn't cluster. When the little doggy in blue was actually a cartoon dog, I'm trying to not give the client away, right? A human knew it wasn't a dog, but a machine wouldn't. And on this version, they're just so fundamentally different that it jacked up the IPM. If you take away the control, it doesn't matter. You just take the top 2 IPM winners and consider them winners and move to the second phase of testing. The mistake we've made is putting the control in because the bar is so high, because there's hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in spend on the control video. It's like a superhero, right? It's impossible to beat. Yeah.
Once that's something narrowed down, will it stay regardless of you?
You know, we get asked that question all the time. It depends on the type of the title, mid-core, hardcore. There are certain sensitivities in Asia with darker palettes, right? Darker primary colors. By and large, yes, you're going to need to localize for markets that are non-English speaking. If you're doing worldwide English speakers, you can blow it out pretty ubiquitously, and it works well. I am often surprised when we take something that's a weird American sense of humor and we test it in countries that are not American at all, and it works well. It's like, so I suppose that the humor translates. Or it just looks ridiculous and, you know, somebody clicks on it. I don't know. Other questions? Thank you, guys. We have a booth. If I can answer any further questions, or John can, please stop by. Thank you for the opportunity.